You're listening to episode 2 of The Map of Us. This podcast series looks at the state of LGBTQ media through the findings of the LGBTQ Media Mapping Project. I'm your host, Dana Piccoli, Managing Director of News Is Out, a pioneering queer media collaborative. Welcome. Today we're focusing on the economics that shape queer newsrooms. Advertising remains the main revenue stream, even as companies pull back from LGBTQ marketing because of political pressure. Yet audiences are growing, and the need for local queer reporting is rising. To break down what this means in practice, we're handing things over to Michael Lavers of the Washington Blade. Michael will talk with our guests Kevin Naff, editor and co-owner of the Washington Blade, and Matt Simonette, publisher and editor of Windy City Times, about how they keep their work going in tough financial climates.
Talk about what Windy City Times, your business structure, and your staffing situation, just to start off. What does that look like? So we'll just go from there.
Well, we're very much structured to try to do to try to get as much done with very few people. So there's me as the publisher, and then our managing editor Jake Wittich, and our webmaster Jean Albright, who's actually Tracy's partner. We're the ones who are probably doing the brunt of the work around there. At Windy City Times, job titles are actually usually like a position above what we actually do. So even though I'm the publisher, most of my duties are the editor in chief duties. Jake is really doing our main news reporting. And then he also oversees our newsletter operation, which is really getting to be an important part of Windy City Times business model as it goes forward. Really hoping that the newsletters can turn into a revenue generating product for us. We've been working on them for about 2 years now, and I think we're really getting ready to start being more aggressive and selling ads in those and so forth. And then Gene is our webmaster. Then we have all kinds of contributors, ones who are very regular for us. And so, we try to keep our news focused locally for Chicago. So, you guys have reasons to cover a lot of national and international news. That's by virtue of your job. But at the same time, we are, really just trying to be as hyper local as possible. And so in terms of like national news, we usually just stick with summarizing from other sources. And then we will fit something, say like the thing that passed today in the House. We'll probably try to localize that to some extent to speak with some agencies around here who would be affected.
And how many say full-time, part-time freelance staffers do you have, Matt? What is the breakdown of that?
So for the three of us are like the main ones. I think we're pretty much the ones who'd be considered full time around there, even though we're technically freelancers, contributors, And then we have an art director who's part time, somebody who works on raising funds for us, who's part time, and then two people selling ads, and it's a part-time operation. So kind of 7 of us at the top, we'd be at the top of the masthead. And then I think I've counted up, we have about 12 contributors who are, who go into the paper on a regular basis.
Got it. And what's your business structure? Are you an LLC? Are you a nonprofit? Are you a profit S corporation?
Is that an LLC? I think we are an LLC. I don't think I don't think Tracy's sole proprietor. We're an LLC.
And you talked about you have a fundraiser who goes out and raises funding. What are the main sources of your funding revenue?
I should say he's not. He's not really a fundraiser. He's somebody who we kind of consult with him on our fundraising things. So the main source of our funding has been some grants that we have gotten over the past few years. Those are during out this year. So, but we've gotten a lot of stuff from Press Forward, both Press Forward Chicago before Tracy went to work for them, Press Forward National, and then we also have had a lot of funding that's come our way through via News is Out, which is where I know Lynn from. So Chris, the guy who I mentioned previously, he's really there to help us design, put together like emails we sent out with asks in them and stuff like that. He, really has a good idea of when people are going to be receptive to all of that, but he's not going out and like making calls and trying to get money raised for us. We took the Lion audit. I don't know if you've heard mention of that. That's basically something that the publishers take, and it gives an idea of their publication sustainability, gives you all kinds of tips. And our main one is we need to have somebody dedicated to revenue generating full time. Ideally, I'd love somebody who can divide their time between, try doing fundraising, writing, doing grant writing and stuff like that. The other half of their time selling ads. But, that's a big, that's a big,
Yeah, grant writing is always a challenge.
yeah.
All too well. So how have your fund how has your revenue stream sources, how has that changed over the last few years? You mentioned grants. How have things changed, say, in the last 5 to 10 years?
We've become more dependent on grants. So it's tough, it's just tough to sell ads online around here. I mean, it's tough to consistently be able to sell online ads. And I don't know what the percentage it was, how grants are funding us, but it's a very large percentage, and that has increased over the years.
And has it been a struggle, say, in the last year with the new administration we have here in Washington? It has. Just talk about how much more difficult it's been to.
Um, First thing, just there were fewer grants out there to apply for because it seemed a lot of funders pulled back from LGBT related things and journalism related things, because back a year ago when who was coming into office, there was the several months where this was going to be a huge paradigm shift for everybody, and all these businesses shied away from it. Well, funders did as well, and so there wasn't a lot out there to apply for. So that was kind of the biggest thing. I can't really speak to whether we lost advertisers or anything like that because of that. I haven't heard much back from the sales team because of that. But I know like News is Out, they had some advertisers pull back.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. And then finally, end on a hopeful note. Perhaps.
Yeah.
It's hard to be hopeful this year, I think.
What's hope?
Spring's eternal, right? Is there anything that gives you hope for the coming year?
I think I'm enthusiastic just that we're always looking for new kinds of business models, as I said, for the newsletter stuff. And Jake has real good ideas on how to monetize the newsletters and everything. He has a real good sense of how to run those things. So I'm hopeful for that.
Yeah, can't really get much worse right now. So first off, just talk about the blades and business infrastructure. What does it look like, and how do we function with that structure?
Sure. So the Blade was incorporated as an S corp, the Washington Blade, and we incorporated the new business in or I guess it was 2010. After the previous company went bankrupt. So we've been operating for about 16 years now under that structure. There are three owners, myself, Lynn Brown, and Brian Pitts, and we launched the Los Angeles Blade about almost 9 years ago now, out in Los Angeles after Frontiers closed. So that is set up separately as a separate business.
And are we an LLC, nonprofit?
We are an S corp.
What does that mean exactly?
It's just the structure and how the revenue is, shared and classified. We are a for-profit company. It is not a nonprofit.
Got it. And in terms of staffing, talk about we're full-time, part-time freelancers. What's the breakdown?
We're about 12 full-time folks between the two cities, and then there are a couple of part-timers, and then we have a lot of freelancers. So in any given month, we probably pay upwards of 20 or so freelancers, and those are, as you know, they are uh, local folks. They are people doing national work, and in some cases, they are contributors from foreign countries that we pay. So we have a pretty robust freelance staff in addition to our full time people.
And how do we get our funding at the Blade? What are our sources of funding?
So that is a big question, and it has evolved, of course. I think when we started the company, Brown Neff Pitts Omnimedia, back in 2009, early 2010, we always wanted to be entrepreneurial. We always wanted to encourage the staff to come to us with new ideas, whether it was for a new business line or a new product. We've launched other publications. LA has been successful. We launched a Baltimore publication that was less successful that we shut down. But we've always tried to be entrepreneurial and fast on our feet. So, one of the benefits of being smaller is that you can pivot and react to market conditions more quickly. So, to answer the question, obviously advertising is still a big component of our revenue, but it has changed. So, in addition to print advertising, there's digital advertising, there is sponsorship of our email newsletter products, there are bigger kind of corporate sponsorship opportunities. We have a robust events business that we're looking to grow in 2026. There is a membership program that has picked up in the last couple, I'd say, last 2 years. We also have the nonprofit arm, the Blade Foundation, donate money, and where funders contribute and fund different facets of our work. Um, so it's pretty diversified. It's important these days to be as diverse as you can in terms of your revenue streams, just because everything, is so kind of volatile and up in the air. And and I will say this as a feather in our cap, grant funding has become kind of the buzzword in the last 2 years, but we've actually been doing that for 10 years now. We, as you know, pursued grant funding back in 2016 to launch a kind of a deep dive reporting project into immigration when Donald Trump was running for president and demonizing migrants. We know that a disproportionate percentage of them identify as LGBTQ, and we wanted to make sure that we were covering, the plight of those migrants. And so, again, as you know, we pursued grant funding through Arcus, and Arcus funded that project. And that was a long time before I think that kind of funding was on the radar of most news outlets, and it was very new to funders. And dealing with some of the funders at that time, it was a challenge because many of them had never funded journalism before, and they didn't know how to track it. They didn't know what metrics to look at to determine whether it was successful. So it was a learning process for all of us. But I like to think that the Blade was really a pioneer when it came to that, to identifying the potential of working with funders to help us pay for this journalism, which can be very expensive.
Absolutely. We're going into 2026, and certainly it's been a very challenging year. I don't need to tell you that. Given the situation in which we currently find ourselves, how have these sources changed? You mentioned grant funding is becoming more important. How have other things evolved or become less important over the last few years, given the climate in which we find ourselves?
Well, I think this year we've looked to readership support a lot more than we have in the past, and the response has been good. I think people understand now that the work that journalists do costs money, and we've never charged for access to the Blade's content. It's always been free for 56 years. And we've never had a paywall, and we don't want to have a paywall. And so, we have been more aggressive, I think, in just reminding our readers that this work is more important than ever. And journalism is really our last defense in terms of withstanding the attacks on democracy that we are seeing from the federal government right now. And people have responded. So it's been to see that from our readership. And we will need more of that going forward. In terms of trends, we've covered in the Blade and it's been covered elsewhere that corporate support for what is viewed as quote DEI has dropped dramatically this year in the face of the Trump administration's attacks. We've seen corporate support shrink. Companies are just afraid to support, not just LGBTQ, but African American press, Latinx, and all sorts of niche media have suffered because of these attacks from the administration and companies, frankly, that are running scared. But I'm reminded of, I did an interview last year with the outgoing CEO of Macy's, and it came in the aftermath of backlash against Bud Light and Target. And one of the things he said to me has kind of stuck with me, which is that you can't back down, because as soon as you back down, they see the weakness and then it'll never stop. But if you hold your ground and you say, as a company, these are our values and we're sticking to them, you will be rewarded for that long term, because your customers also understand and respect that. So we appreciate our corporate supporters who have stuck by us, and we're hoping with a change in tone and maybe a change in the midterm elections that corporate America will see the error of their ways and will come back to supporting this community that has supported them for so long.
Before we wrap, we want to thank our partners supporting this work. The LGBTQ Media Mapping Project is funded by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, with support from the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at City University of New York, Local Media Association, and News is Out. To learn more about the Media Mapping Project, visit newsisout.com. Special thanks to Ken Schneck of the Buckeye Flame for letting us use this podcast platform, and for Michael for guiding today's conversation, and of course, our special guests. And thank you for listening. If you find your local queer media valuable, and we hope you do, please consider supporting them financially. We'll see you on the next episode of The Map of Us.